know where you are throughout the country. I'd like to go through and we have no overlap in first names today, so I'll be able to call you by first name and then have you share just your full name and where you're located and what you do for the practice, if you would please. And the purpose in this, just to comment on that, on why would we go through having you give your name, so on and so forth, is so that you can know that you can interact with one another, kind of know where each person is located. I'm stumbling across my words today, sorry. And that way, if you hear something interesting somebody shares, you know that you can reach out to that person, and we'll mention that at the end of today's call as well. And you can always use us as a resource to say, hey, I want to talk to that person that said such and such. We'll be able to help as far as that goes if we need to connect you. And for those who are just now coming in, if you would put your audio pins in, that will allow us to let you introduce yourself. So let's see. We will start with Kaylin, if you would please.
Hello, I'm Kaylin. We're in Lakeland, Florida, and I'm the Client Service Coordinator.
Perfect. And let's see, Kelly. It doesn't look like Sharissa or Dee are on here with you today.
They're both out.
Aha, okay. All right.
So
well, we're glad to have Kelly.
I'm in Fredericksburg, Texas. And I am the Financial Planning and Client Service Assistant.
All right, perfect. All right. And then let's see, who do we have next that I'm, Marlo.
Hi, this is Marlo, and I'm in Port Huron, Michigan, and I'm a Client Service Manager for Jeff Wallace.
All right, great. And I'm watching as people are coming in still. We've still got some folks joining us, so I'm kind of trying to pop up and down through the list and make sure I catch them. If you're on your way in, if you would please make sure you enter your audio pen so we'll be able to speak with you. And let's see, Carla and Sarah, it looks like you guys still need to enter your audio pens, so we'll hold up on those. And Laurie, how about you? And Laurie, it looks like you may have yourself muted from your side.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
My name's Lori, and I'm the paraplanner for Martinez and Associates, and I have Carol and Sherry and Vance with me too.
Wow! Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. 4 for the price of 1. So, Carol, will you share what you do there in the practice?
A little bit of everything.
Mostly business processing, though, right?
Business processing and RMDs.
No, there you go. You guys have lots of those. And Sherry?
I would say Client Service Coordinator.
There we go. And how about you, Vance?
Business processing.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have all 4 of you on. All right. Let's see. Who have I missed here? Sarah.
Hi. Sorry, I was having a bit trouble getting connected.
That's okay. I actually had trouble at the beginning with the phone myself, so I totally understand.
Am I just introducing myself?
Yeah, just your name and where you're located and
Okay.
what you do there.
I'm Sarah Leffler. I'm located in Richmond, Virginia, and I am the Client Service Manager for Corey Neesmith.
Perfect. And Laurie, I forgot to have you and your crew tell where you're located.
We're in Visalia, California.
Perfect. So we've got people all over the map today. And let's see, I've talked to Sarah, glance here. And I think that's everyone who, oh, nope, hang on, Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. We're asking everybody to just introduce themselves, first and last name, and tell us where you're located and what you do in the practice that you're working for.
Hi, Vicki. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Michelle. I'm with Rosenthal Associates, and I am in Maryland, and I'm a paraplanner / case manager.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And I got a little bit of a message that Carla's on the call, but she apparently had phone challenges too. It's not letting her put her PIN in. So Carla, I apologize that we can't get an introduction from you, but Carla DeShazer is in Southfield, Michigan, and works for Cornerstone and is a basically client coordinator admin there. So I'll introduce her even though she's not able to speak. Carla, you might be able to hang up and dial back in and redial your number with your PIN and be able to join us that way if you want to try that. And glancing through one more time, I don't want to leave anybody out who was able to get in here in the last minute or two, and I apologize for any technology or phone challenges that anybody's experienced today. Not sure why that's happening this go around. And Casey, I haven't forgotten about you. We'll come back. We're going to introduce you when we get a couple slides into this. So I will move on. So what is the CMOT? I think most of you have had exposure to some degree, some just brand new exposure to it and some for a while. But the CMOT is the Client Meeting Outcome Tracker. And the purpose of it is to report the outcome of your client meetings, so the ones that are held in your practice with your clients. And what it's reporting basically is what happened in that meeting, so it gives an opportunity for one last review of that meeting to make sure that nothing's going to slip through the cracks. Basically serving as a safety net. And when you go into the CMOT, there are 3 different views you'll see in the screenshot here that they're circled in red. So we're going to just briefly touch on what those 3 views look like or what they include so that you have an idea of the difference in them. The first is all open items. And this is all meetings that are currently open except those with a status of ready for weekly recap meetings. So that's what WRM stands for, is weekly recap meeting, and we affectionately call it WORM sometimes. So if you hear us say WORM, you'll know that we're talking about the weekly recap meeting. The all items view is all meetings opened or closed. So if you're searching for something that already happened and it's been closed out, or you're not sure which screen it might be in, whether you could find it in all open items or find it in the weekly recap view, you can go to all items and find everything. And then the third one is the weekly recap view, and it has all open meetings with a current or past meeting date. So whether they're marked ready for WORM or whether they're in process or some other status, if it has a current or past meeting date, as long as it's not closed, that's the only status that wouldn't show there. But if it has a current or past meeting date, you would be able to find it there. So who enters the CMOT and when? So I've got 3 different scenarios here, and they're basically all similar as far as who enters. Well, on the when, they're all similar. The main difference is the who. So if you're doing internal prep within your practice, the clients are added to the CMOT by your team during the case prep cycle. So that typically begins 2 to 3 weeks before a client meeting is what we recommend as a best practice. If it's outsourced prep, then clients are added to the CMOT by the KMG case prep team when the case prep request is submitted. Also, that should be about 2 to 3 weeks before the client meeting. And then there are some practices who do a combination of internal and outsourced prep. And for those, the clients would be added to the CMOT by the KMG case prep team when they get the case prep request, again, 2 to 3 weeks before the meeting. And then any internally prep meetings would be added by the advisory team. So now I would like to introduce today's content expert, and she is Casey Noon. And Casey, rather than my telling where you are and the structure of your practice and all, if you would please share a little bit about yourself, what you do there in the practice, and the structure of the practice, and feel free to tell us something about the little fella in the picture.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Casey Noon. I'm a paraplanner. I work with one other woman under our advisor, Charles Evans, and our office is in Charleston, West Virginia. And the little guy is a rescue dog, and he's my buddy. And he made the debut.
Yes, he did. That's Oliver. Doesn't he look like an Oliver with his little bow tie? So, all right. So we will go ahead and step into Casey's process now and talk some about that. And as I bring up the points on the slide, I don't want you to feel like I'm just reading them to you or Casey's reading them to you. So we'll step through this rather interactive, hopefully. And we do have all the lines muted, but if anybody has any questions or comments along the way that you would like to make, please just raise your virtual hand. So there's a spot where you can click on the hand on that right-hand pane, and feel free to do that, and then we'll watch for any hands that go up so that we can unmute you and let you ask your question or speak to a comment you may have. And then we'll have time at the end where we open all the lines so everybody can interact. All right. So Casey's process starts with the admin, the other lady she mentioned in her practice. And she does enter the shell about 2 weeks in advance of the meeting. And Casey, would you share what all she puts in for that shell?
Now, absolutely. When Joanne starts the CMOT, she'll put in the next meeting date. She goes ahead and looks at their GSF and notices their frequency. She'll put that in, and she normally just puts in the name, the next meeting date, and just in process, which I complete with the steps of after the advisor will complete his meeting with the client, he'll immediately put his notes into CopyTalk notes, which I get a direct email from CopyTalk specifying his notes, and after a few trials here and there, we found it to be more efficient with having the advisor make bullet points in his CopyTalk notes specifying what the actual follow-up is that he's recommending, because sometimes you can ramble on and on during CopyTalk and it's hard to see what the actual task is at hand. So we notice the follow-up, and from there I immediately post the notes to CMOT, filling in whether or not the BPT, FAT, SPO, or any tracker needs to be updated. And once I've completed all the inputs, then I'll put ready for worm, and we'll recover in our weekly recap meeting on Wednesdays with the advisor present. And then once we go over that, it's easy to open. I find it most successful to open up just multiple tabs, having a return mail tab, SPO tab, BPT tab, and just plugging in the client's name so you can see everything that's been updated on the CMOT tracker, and then pulling and recovering in that weekly recap meeting.
All right, perfect. And we're going to, she kind of gave you a general overview of her whole process, and so we're going to step through that and break some of those down into pieces now. So when she mentioned that Joanne, the admin, enters the shell, the other pieces she puts in are, Casey mentioned the client name. Joanne puts in the actual meeting date and does the verification fields and does the SPO update and review at that point. So Casey, you guys found it that it worked best for Joanne to do that piece of it, I believe you said, because she's the owner of that tool?
She is.
Okay. And then you mentioned that your advisor's pretty good. I know you, in speaking with one another ahead of time,
they have to be hounded, but
well, all do. But it's pretty good about getting the notes in there right away, and so you generally are able to take the next steps rather within about a day of the meeting. And she mentioned copy talk notes. I wanted to ask you, Casey, do you use a like a format that Mitch follows as he's entering those, that triggers his next thought of putting in that information, or has it just become a habit that he knows what to put in when?
It's been a habit. He's always used copy talk notes, but once I started reviewing, and we just tried to look at it as a more efficient way when I'm reviewing the notes, how would it be time efficient to where we have just a clear, precise look at what needs to be done, what is the follow-up, what's immediate, what does he want to set out a couple weeks to follow up on. So it's just easier. It's a habit on its own, but then knowing it's easier as well to make a follow-up list on the copy talk notes. So he's done really good with being clear and efficient with that.
Perfect. So you had mentioned too that your meeting notes are pasted in SmartPad on Contact Manager, right? So you just copy from the copy talk email, clean it up, and put it in directly in as text? Okay. And I just wanted to make a note to everyone that if you do not enter your meeting notes as text on the SmartPad, so if they are in an attachment like a PDF, it is required that they also be uploaded to OFM. So if you're entering them straight as a text on the SmartPad, that's fine. That covers the compliance requirement. But again, just to restate it, if it's an attachment, it has to be uploaded to OFM. And Casey, I believe when you and I were chatting, I had asked you about what prompts you to even work on the CMOT, and you said it was the receipt of the copy talk notes, right?
Yes, and that's what makes me immediately complete the CMOT once I have everything that I need and just get that done all at once, so it's not hanging on.
And then because Casey has put her copy talk notes directly in as a part of doing the CMOT, she's not waiting on notes, she's not having to hold off or chase down the advisor or whatever. It's the copy talk notes that prompt her to complete it. She's able to mark the field notes to CM and OFM, so that's notes to Contact Manager and OFM, which is, if that's applicable for you, as yes when she is entering all her other items on the CMOT. She doesn't have to come back to that. But if you have not actually put your notes in Contact Manager or OFM yet, we strongly recommend don't mark them yes until they really actually have been in there. Don't zip through the CMOT just to have that piece completed. You want to wait until you know they are in there, because that's a very, very important part of it, to know that they're compliantly entered. All right, let's move on. When we look at the CMOT, and we're not going to focus on these fields today, but if you go into any of your CMOTs, there are the expected and actual money movement and new fee fields. KCs Practice does not use these fields. It just wasn't necessary for their purposes. And but if any of you would like to have more information on what those fields are used for, feel free to ask at the end of the call when we have an open group conversation time, or reach out to the person that holds your production meeting and dig into that a little bit more. All right, so Casey, you mentioned as you were going through the general overview of your process, you already mentioned these, but I would like to spend a little bit of time just briefly to focus on, you mentioned that you go ahead and open up all of these tracking tools in separate tabs as you're going through the weekly recap. So if you speak again to why do you open them in separate tabs and how you use them as well when you're doing your completion of the CMOT.
For when we do our weekly recap, I find it to just be more efficient to have just a separate tab opened for the following trackers, only because if you're searching for Joe Smith and you're trying to, you notice he has BPT, RM, FAT, and the SPO has already been updated, but you want to review that with the advisor just to refresh their memory of what took place in the meeting. I mean, a lot can be forgotten in just a week time from a meeting with a last client. So I find it to be more efficient just to have it all open and just searching in the search tab, having Smith inputted and then seeing, okay, we have the FAT updated, we have BPT, some items have already been closed, some are still open, you know, what's the process for that, when's the next date we want to follow up with. It's just easier to track and get a better grasp on, at least our practice looks at it that way.
Okay, perfect. And you, when you're completing your portion of the CMOT, so this is prior to the weekly recap meeting, when you're completing your portion of the CMOT, you have those tabs open as well. And you actually physically go to the tabs based on the advisor's notes and make sure that items, or respective items, are entered as needed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then as we mentioned previously, in their practice, their administrator completes the SPO piece as she's doing the shell. So she's able to already have checked that field off as she's doing the shell. And they do use GSF and alphanum verification. And that's done by the admin as she's entering the shell. KCs Practice does not use subtype. It's not something that they have had need to use or felt that they needed to break down. But I know there are a lot of practices who do use subtype. Of those that are on the line, if any of you are using subtype and would be willing to raise your hand, spit out the word, raise your virtual hand is what I was trying to say, and share how you're using subtype. If anybody would be willing to do that, I'd appreciate it. So we'll give it just a second to see if anybody raises their hand for use of subtype. All right. Okay, we have a taker. All right. Kelly, I've unmuted you. If you wouldn't mind sharing how you guys use the subtype field.
We use a subtype A through E. The advisors ultimately decide if a client is an A or a B client, I guess, based on the relationship, and then if they're financial planning, we'll do a hyphen in there, A-FP. And then that way, when we're doing marketing events, I think we have something like, I don't know, I mean, we have hundreds of client groups. And so then that way, we're not inviting every client to every marketing event, or, you know, there's little extra things that we do for different client groups. We base our meetings off of that also, like how many meetings they have per year. You know, like an A client might be 3 to 4 visits a year, and B and below could be 1 to 2 visits with the advisors per year. So we use it in a lot of different ways, really.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And Kelly, you can click on your hand to put it back down again in case you need to raise it later. Thanks. All right, let's move along and KCs Process here. So if the next meeting field is empty, Casey, you said that you check the GSF, you actually go to check it, and and you shared that it usually ends up being an annual client.
That's correct.
Because you guys pre-schedule.
And it's very, just like it says, it's very rare if we do not have a next GSF on there. We don't really have many clients who are just annual clients.
Okay, great. So that field's generally filled out, and you're able to roll. We'll touch a little bit more on pre-scheduling here in a couple of minutes. And then if there's any type of referral comment at all, Casey marks that field as yes and adds to the prospect tracker. So Casey, would you share what you add? Like if you have just minimal info, maybe give an example of one that comes to mind.
Absolutely. We actually had a client just about a month ago. He came in and he was talking to the advisor, and he had told him, you know, I gave a buddy of mine your card, and he was asking a bunch of us guys just for referrals because he's looking to retire soon. His name is Joe Smith. This was all the information that the client gave to the advisor. The client even stated at the end, I'm not even sure if he'll give you a call or not. But even with just that little information of that name, we still put that on the prospect tracker just so if he does call, we understand, okay, this is the client he referred us to, and, you know, we have a little bit more information knowing who he was referred from. And then we have some clients who actually, just last week, we received a voicemail that a client said, you know, so-and-so referred me to you all. He stated his name, who he's coming with, his business, he owns the business. All this information just gathered from a voicemail, which was pretty crazy. So we put all that stuff on the tracker so we have more information. And then clients like that who do give information, well, prospects who give information that's more detailed, it's easier to follow up on with them, be in touch with, or schedule something, as opposed to a client who just mentioned the name of a friend of his that may or may not be giving us a call. So it kind of varies, but we keep any referral mentioned on the prospect tracker.
Perfect. And I like your example of the phone call too, because yes, that's outside of what would come as a result of the CMOT, but it gives another idea of, you know, how things are being fed your way, and that you guys are being proactive in making sure that you put it on the prospect tracker and follow up from there, or have, you know, even if not follow up, you have the information if they follow up with you. So that's perfect.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then the statuses that Casey shared with me, she uses are not started, that's the default, in process, ready for weekly recap, and closed. And Casey shared with me that they rarely have a need to use follow-up needed as a status because of the advisor's usually timely and thorough information that he provides on his notes. So she's got a winner there for sure on being able to glean that information. But the statuses in process would be what you would want to change it to if you were in the process of working on it and got stopped for something else or needed to check something else. And then, like I mentioned, not started is the default status. It just means the shell's in there and the next steps haven't been taken yet. Ready for recap is, we'll speak to that a little bit more in a minute, as well as the closed status. All right. So Casey, once you have all the fields in there, you are the one that changes the status to ready for weekly recap, correct?
I do. Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go ahead and put these next couple of pieces on the screen together. So you're also the one that changes the status to closed, but why are you the one doing that? What triggers it?
I hold our weekly recap each week, and once we review and make sure every item that came over from Copy Talk Notes, whether it be the BPT that needed updated, FAT, any of those trackers, and once the advisor has agreed, okay, you have everything that I mentioned in my notes, everyone has their destination of who has which task at hand, he will confirm, okay, this case is now closed, and we can move on with just what's left on the trackers to complete for that client.
Okay, perfect. All right, and I know you had shared that the CMOT, when you hold your weekly recap, the CMOT is the first item you cover, and then it's as a result of some of those items on the CMOT that you're kind of popping back and forth to some of the other trackers for clarification and that type of thing, correct?
Yes, and then once we're done reviewing the CMOT, that's when we pull up our weekly recap.
Okay. So here is an example of KC's CMOT. I mentioned the expected and actual money movement and fee fields. I pulled those out of this one for the sake of having it where we would all be able to see it on the screen. Hopefully it's not too small for you guys. So the meeting date, Joanne has filled in, and then these other fields in between are what Casey does on her part. Joanne would have already filled out the contact manager fields and the next meeting date, and then we spoke to the referral discussion and the status. I wanted to comment on the details, and I've got another example of her CMOT that I want to just glance at the details in comparison to one another to give everybody an idea of what types of details Casey puts in. So on this one it says focusing on the topics of reviewing beneficiary arrangements and updating her status from single to married and checking all accounts to make sure all coincide with recent changes to her marital status. So it sounds like this meeting was pretty specific to a client needs service. And then if we go to the next one, the details state reviewing overall portfolio. Items on agenda include looking at selling positions held and buying UIT, discuss taking RMD, money movement, and sign client up for total view. So this sounds like it was probably a part of a planned client agenda meeting. Would you concur with that, Casey?
Yes.
The difference in the two? Okay. And so as she puts the details in here and reviews those during weekly recap meeting, this would allow it to trigger something maybe in the advisor's mind he hadn't put in the notes, or he may just ask, oh, did you catch this in the notes or whatever. So the purpose of putting brief details in is to make sure that everybody's mind kind of gets a quick refresh on what that meeting was about. Okie dokie. So I'd like to go on to what Casey shared with me was what we call the expert's outcome. So it's basically, you know, what has she found as an advantage of using the CMOT? And rather than my or her reading through the bullets here, you all can see those. Casey, if you would just speak to it in your own words of how you have found the CMOT to be beneficial to your practice, please.
Okay. I have to say our biggest gain with using these tools with our team is just holding everyone accountable for what their tasks are. It's really taken a great deal of stress off everyone's plates and has made the work way more efficient with a quicker turnaround process of completing the task for the clients. And just with having the CMOT and just having all the trackers saying what you're supposed to do and who's following up with what, it just makes, the trackers just makes these items not get lost in the cracks overall, and it just makes it for a way more efficient practice.
Great. I think I'll just let you hold this meeting in the future. That's great. All right, so now I'm going to speak to some of our best practice recommendations. And get this little guy to go there. So we recommend that you complete the CMOT for meetings held within the past week prior to your recap meeting. So if KMG holds your recap meeting still or you hold it internally, it doesn't matter which way it happens, but just try to have them up to date with those meetings that were within the past week when your team sits down for recap. And preferably, we'd recommend that you complete the CMOT within 24 hours, or a business day would be more accurate, of it being held. So I'm kind of curious, and I'm going to put a poll question out there. I wanted to know, are you completing your CMOT within one business day of the meeting being held? So hopefully you should have a poll popping up on your screen there, and if you wouldn't mind answering that, that would be great. And I've got the tallying up now as everybody does. All right. Looks like, interestingly enough, we have about 50-50 on being able to do it within the one business day. So for those of you who said no, that you're not able to do that, would anyone care to raise their hand and share what kind of challenges you have found in being able to do it within the business day? And perhaps someone else could speak to how they, you know, if they had a similar challenge, how they overcame that. I'm just going to give that a few seconds here to see if anybody chooses to raise their hand and speak to that. All right. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Kelly. Let me unmute you here. All right. Kelly was willing to share with us on that one.
I was waiting to see if anyone else would raise their hand.
Yeah. Let somebody else raise their hand this time, right?
Wait until the advisors complete their meeting note. And so if we get some of our advisors do the meeting note same day, and then the designated person in our office who processes the meeting note, it's her responsibility to process, complete, you know, the meeting note process, you know, the whole CMOT and everything to complete for our meetings on Monday. It's her job to finish all that by Friday, be up to date by Friday of the ones that are completed. But a lot of times they don't, the advisors were waiting on meeting notes a lot of times. Two out of 3 of our advisors were waiting on meeting notes quite a bit.
Gotcha. So she's doing the chase down thing.
Yes. So
of chasing down the advisors to get them.
Yeah.
Right.
So Friday she also issues a BPT for each advisor of their outstanding meeting notes from prior weeks. So.
Oh, okay. I like that idea. So it's another place that you're capturing for them. If they go to their BPT consistently, it's a reminder of, hey, we need to get these in from you.
Right.
Okay, perfect. I think that, thanks for sharing that, Kelly. I think that anybody in the 50% not having it happen is probably, you know, in that chase down phase. So the BPT idea is an idea for a way to remind the advisor you need them if you have an advisor that's faithful about going to their BPT. And other than that, we will just, if of any of those that were on the no side would like some additional assistance from practice management team on ideas of how to make that happen more efficiently as far as timing goes, please feel free to reach out again to your production meeting leader and kind of brainstorm together on some ways to tackle that. All right. Next on the best practices, and I am hesitating because I'm making sure I closed my poll out there. I didn't do that once and it was still on the screen. If the completion role is split, so like in Casey's example it should be clearly defined which team member completes which sections and when. So you heard Casey speak to that on how they do it, when they do it, that type of thing. So if your practice is splitting it out, just make sure those people who hold those roles know who they are and which pieces they're doing and the timeliness of when it needs to be completed. The status for CMOT should only be marked closed by KMG or the practice team member that's holding the weekly recap meeting. So Casey mentioned in her process that she's the one that marks it closed because she's the one holding that meeting. The reason that we strongly recommend this particular best practice is that way we know, or the person holding the meeting knows, that they've got the advisor's buy-off, that it's done, that the advisor has said, yep, we've covered everything we need to and we can move on. Things are on the trackers, we're good to go. All right, moving along. So in the details section, as we saw in Casey's example, we recommend that you enter a brief description that will allow for memories to be triggered. So you don't need to paste in the whole long, lengthy meeting notes. Just phrases are fine, just to help people remember, what happened in the meeting so that it can be discussed and closed out during the recap. Again, we recommend, I already touched on this, that you mark the notes to contact manager and OFM as yes only once they actually have been. So even if it means you have to leave your CMOT line item open, if you've got everything else entered for it, but not that actually confirmed and where it needs to be, leave the CMOT item open and leave that field blank until you take that step. And just to reiterate as well, that if notes are in an attachment format in Contact Manager, they must be uploaded to OFM as well. So if it's a PDF or a Word document, those would be the two primary that would come to mind that might be used for attachments for notes. You have to upload them to OFM, and that's an Ameriprise compliance requirement. All right, and further on the best practices here, for updating and reviewing the tracking tools, we highly recommend and would discourage you, no, I'm just kidding if you don't, but that you go to each of those tracking tools and actually make sure the items have made it there. So don't just rush through the CMOT and go, yeah, I know those things are there. Actually go to each tracking tool the way Casey shared that she does and make sure that the items have made it so that nothing drops through the cracks. And then the next meeting field shouldn't be overlooked. It absolutely should be completed to ensure that pre-scheduling is taking place and that you're getting people on cycle with their GSF and making sure that those meetings are happening as they need to. So on that one, I have one more poll question to ask, and that is your practice pre-scheduling and therefore able to fill in the next meeting field when you're completing the CMOT? So if you wouldn't mind answering that poll question. And I'll just give it another second here for those who are answering. Okay, perfect. We've got 100% on that one of those who responded, that 100% of you are pre-scheduling, so that's wonderful to hear. And then just as a reminder, if a referral discussion occurred, make sure that you enter it as yes and put it onto the prospects tracker. And so Casey gave you some ideas on that. All right, we're going to open all the phone lines now and allow for any questions. So on the screen it says, please raise your hand if you have any, but we're just going to go ahead and open all the lines, and so that we can have group discussion here. I'm popping through. So if you're trying to say something and it's not open yet, it's because I'm working my way down the list. All right, so if any of you have any questions or clarification, feel free to speak up, or if any of you have tackled the timing and the use of the CMOT in some other creative way, we'd welcome you sharing any of those thoughts or ideas. So all your lines are open now if anyone has anything they'd like to share or ask. All right. Well, I don't want to drag you through it or make you say anything, so just wanted to give an opportunity for that. And so if you should have any questions that you want to ask one-on-one, that you either weren't comfortable in asking in front of the group or it was not group relevant. We will be standing by for questions for the next 10 minutes or so, so I will be available. I'll be glad to give you my phone number if you would like to call me directly. And so that is area code 248-404-9660, and my extension is 230-230. And if you'd rather email me on it, I'll give you my Ameriprise email. It's Victoria, VICTORIA, .L, like Larry, .Walton, WALT as in Tom, ON as in Nancy, at ampf.com. So feel free to reach out to me or to the person that holds your production meeting, anybody on the practice management team. We'd all be glad to help you out any way that we can if you have any questions or comments. And then following the call, a PDF will be sent by email as a follow-up that will give some best practices and things. And there will be a survey that automatically pops up when you when we end the call here. And just as a reminder, the whole goal here is to give resources to you of one another, so that you can reach out to your peers, or maybe you heard something that Casey shared or Kelly shared or whatever, and you want to reach out and speak with them some more on it. Please feel free to reach out to them. If you didn't catch full names, just reach out to one of us on practice management team and we'll be glad to connect you up. So that all stated, I thank you for your time today, and we will let everybody go.